Hey guys, so far what we have done is we have created our game module, and whenever we refresh or onload our page, we get two random numbers, and of course these options are yet to be done. But before we get on to the options, I wanted to make sure that we understand how this randomness can be built in. So let me quickly update the code. Instead of these random numbers, let me just say again it is 5, 5, and the options are 8, 9, 10, 11. So now if I refresh the page, the options the options are 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's try to print it out too. So just the way we did a document.getElementID for the fields, let's try to do it for the options. So the way we can do it is, this can be the option 1 is what I will write for now. Let me go ahead and change it. So this has to be option 2, option 3, option 4. And instead of this should come from the riddle dot results array. Now as you can see, I'm doing multi-line typing out here, and that's a Sublime Text feature. So if you're not using Sublime Text, probably you'll have to go and edit it yourself, but if you are, then you're lucky, you can type in along with me. Now once you do this, I just need to make sure I have the first element out here, second here, and the third here. Let me refresh the screen and see all the three options. Okay, because I'm trying to do a riddle dot, you see that? So I need to make sure that I update this. Tuck. Let's try to select the 4. Let's just make sure this is equals. Now I got that. Let's refresh the page and I can see 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is challenging enough. 5 and 5, and it's close to 10. Now how we can do it? So you can see these two numbers are lower and this one is higher, and this is randomly. You can make it random too. Now how can this work? You need to make sure that on certain randomness figure you have a plus or a minus, which means first you get the total as 10. Let's say I got the answer as, let me write it here. So 5 plus 5 equals 10. Now I have it random enough. I can generate randomly a positive or a negative sign, and then I can have a random number, let's say 1, to add or subtract to it. So if the first time or the first random number I get is 1, the answer will become 10. Let's say I get a plus, so it will become 11. Now if I get a 2 and the answer is minus, or probably the sign is minus, which is randomly generated 2, I get an 8. Let's say the third option I have is again a random number, and that's 1, and of course that's a subtraction, and the answer becomes 9. So I can get three options, 8, 9, 11, and of course the correct one, which is 10. So we are going to have one set of logic to generate the positive or a negative sign, and one set of logic to get the random number. And of course when I get these two sets, I need to make sure I add or subtract to the results. Okay, if that makes sense, that's awesome. We'll try to put it into code and see how that works. Now we have our randomness. Now before even we do that, let's try to say variable results array is equals to generate random options. Okay, so this should return a array, or this should return an array. Let's say function name, arguments, it doesn't have any, and let's write the body. Now from here we are sure that we need to return a results array. So let's make sure we have the results array return results array. Okay, now that's for sure. Now also we need our answer to be around the sum, which means whatever is field 1 and field 2 sum. So let's do a variable result is equals to field 1 plus field 2. Now whatever is the result, we need to pass it to the generate options, because our option have to be around that. Now once we do that, let's make sure we add the sum here, so that we are getting the sum of two numbers. Nothing should change, everything should still be the same. Now once we do that, we need to have three random numbers. So let's create an array, which is random number array, and again this array can have three random numbers that we will generate. So if you recollect the 1, 2, and 1 that we saw, it can be put in this array. We also need an add subtract field which means we can have the positive or the negative sign. So add subtract, let's say I don't give anything, or I can just use the random number function and call this between 0 and 1. So if it's a 0, let's say it's false, and if it's a 1, it means it's a plus or a subtraction and addition sign that we can use. So let's say if I have add subtract is double equals to triple equals to 1, which means an addition, you say add random number to the result. Else, oh, I did an ID instead of if, my bad. And I'm sure you might be yelling from your computer screen saying that, hey, that's an ID. So whoever yelled at me, thank you so much for noticing. And else subtract random number from the result. Okay, so now you have the positive as well as the negative signs. Now we need to get the random number. Now it can very well happen when you generate a random number between, like in this scenario, zeros and 1. So there are only two options. So when you try to do a random number, there is 50% possibility it will be 0 and a 50% possibility it will be 1. But we don't know what that is. So it can also repeat itself, which means it can have 2 plus and 2 minus 2, because of course you're generating 3 options. Similarly, when you do a random number, you will also have problems if you do not make sure those are unique numbers, because then you will see 2 options as 11, and that kills the purpose, because definitely 2 options can be ruled out immediately, right? So what we can do is we can have a logic which checks for random numbers length. So whenever you have a random number, you can just do, let's say, a while loop, and whenever you have a random number array, random number array dot length, as long as the length is less than 3, I think 0, 1, 2, that should be good enough. We can go ahead and make sure we generate a random number. Random number is equals to, again we can use the same random number function. Random number function, give the min and the max. Now let me try and give this between 1 and let's say 10, so that we can add anything between 1 and 10 to the number, or subtract between 1 and 10 to the number, so that it's close enough. Now once I get that, I can quickly do a random array dot push to add an element to the array, and then do random number. I think that's the random number, not the function. Now there is only one problem, that if the number is the same, I need to make sure that I do not add to the array. So the way we can do that is, if random number array dot index of, so that ways you can check if that is there, random number. Once you have the random number, if this gives you anything greater than -1, which means it's already present, close the if loop, you do a continue. And if not, which means if you do a continue, it will not go to the next step, and it will try to run the loop once again. Until the time you have all 3 unique numbers in a random array, you will continue the loop. Let's try to do a console.log of this random number array and see what we get every time we refresh the screen. Let's save it. Let's go to the console and let's try to run it. Say random number is not defined, line number 98. And what is the name of the function then? It's called random number. Alright, it seems like there's a problem because I use the random number as a function name as well as, an assignment. So let me just change this to a random variable and random, so that I get the random. Let's try to refresh. Yes, now I see 3 options, which is 2, 1 and 6. So that was randomly generated. And again, that will be added or subtracted from this number. So I can also get the add subtract. Let me try to print the add subtract. And let's try to see an example. So in this scenario, I'll have 5 and 5, which is 10. And then I'll add, the first time when I go in, I should get a positive 1, which means I'll have an addition of 4. Then I will have to generate it again, which means I have to run this also in a loop 3 times. So the way I can run another loop is, I can call in a for loop, and I can say variable I is equals to 0, I is less than 3 because I need 3 numbers only, I plus plus, and then I will go inside the loop, and this addition has to go in out here. Let's say I move it here. Let's say I say variable result is equals to sum. Now for many of you, you might not be aware of the let and the constant keywords. I've used let a lot in this example, and I just realized that in the curriculum or in the syllabus, the way I'm going to use it is I'm going to be placing this above the bonus lectures. And if it's going to be above, which is in the bonus lectures, you see the let and the constants, how it is. It's more of an ES6 thing. So if you do not understand this, just replace it with a variable. So let me just do that for you so that everything will work. And I'm sure you might be like, what the hell is this guy doing? So let me just make sure it's all variables. Yes, everything else is variables, okay? So that everything works. Now, once we have the result and the sum, let's try to make sure we print it out too. So console.log, and now I will print out the add subtract switch. Let's see what we get on the screen. So we have 3 things, which is 2 times 1 and 1 times 0, and we have 3 random numbers. So fantastic. So 2 additions and 1 subtractions. Now I identified that there are 2 4s, which means there's a problem here. So I just need to make sure this is also updated to random. Let's update. Now you have 3 7 and 8 and 1 0 1, which means plus, minus and plus. Very easy, right? So let's try to put this logic to use, which means let's move this if condition also inside the for loop. Now we do not need to display this as an output. What we can do is in the add subtract, we can just do a result plus equals to whatever is the number in the results array. So let's say results array of, again, this loop also has 3 elements and this loop also got us 3 elements. So it will be working fine for us. Similarly, we'll do a subtract. So minus equal to. Now once we do this, we need to make sure that we add it to the results array. So the way we can do it is outside the for loop and the if loop, which is results array dot push the values. Let's save it. And let's try to do a console.log results array. Let's comment this out. We don't need this anymore. And let's try to refresh the page. We get not a number, not a number, not a number, which means there's a problem because this I gave it as a 0th element. Let's make sure I give this as a ith element, and this is not the results array. This has to be the random number array. So now I know what the mistakes were. I corrected them, and let's refresh the page. And you have 17, 4 and 13. So we have 10 as an answer and these 3 as the other outputs. Now let's try to use this results array into our riddle. So the way we can do it is when we generate it, we get the results array out here. You can just replace it out here, but it gives you only 3 elements. So that will not work. Let's also add the result to it. So the way we can do it is results array dot push and then push the result to it. Let's remove this. So now we have the result also. Let's try to now move this out here so that we can see the options on the screen. Let's close this. We no longer need the console. Let's refresh and you can see 3 random numbers. Again, 3 random numbers. You see that? Now there is a problem here. The reason is always the 4th option is the correct option if you see. So that's not going to work out because the user is not going to think. After 2 guesses, they already know that 10th is the right answer. So what we can do is, let's remove this random number here. Let's remove this random number also. So let's make sure this is random again. Now let's try to make this random because now every time you refresh the screen, it's always going to be the 4th option. Now to make this random, we can use results array dot sort. Now if you do a sort, there is again a problem because then it will do it in the ascending order. Let's try to do it. So now you can see 71, 72, 79, 81. So it will be also not that random. And of course, it will be easier for the user to say how high this. Now let's try to make it a little more random by adding a function to it. So if you recollect the array sort class, you can remember that the way we made this random enough was we did a return, and here we did a 0.5 minus math.random. So now once we do that, it should be random enough, and it will not be in the order, and it will be a little difficult and challenging for the user to guess it. Of course, the 90 is the correct answer. So the next step is, of course, making sure that when the user clicks these options, user can see the result if it was right versus wrong, and that we will capture in the next class. We've covered a lot in this class, so make sure you pause the videos, and of course there are few things that we changed from the previous class too. So make sure you understand them correctly. And again, if you need any help, I'm always there for helping you. I'll see you in the next class.